Good afternoon. My name is Jim Conlan, and welcome to the latest edition of our entertainment show, where we look at blockbuster movies and blockbuster TV screens, TV features, and TV series debuting here in Ireland in the next month or so. And this week, we're all featuring about the blockbuster movie. It's gone down to massive acclaim over in Australia and in the USA, where it appeared in HBO Max, the one and only, the iconic movie Mortal Kombat. I'm delighted now this evening to be joined by one of the stars of the movie franchise, the reincarnation of the Mortal Kombat movie. He plays the character Kung Lao. I'm only talking about the one and only Max Huang. Max, Mortal Kombat. I suppose going back a year ago, I did a sort of documentary on the Mortal Kombat sort of franchise, and I spoke to a good lot of people who appeared in the Mortal Kombat movie in 1995, and Annihilation in 1997, and spoke to people who appeared in Legacy and Conquest, sort of TV series as well. And one thing they all said about Mortal Kombat is before they got involved in it, they were heavily aware of it. As a kid growing up, if it wasn't them that was playing it, it was a brother or a sister or a loved one, or some of them can remember the arcade games going back sort of that far. Is that the sort of same case for you, Max? Was Mortal Kombat when you were a 15, 16-year-old boy, were you very much well aware of what Mortal Kombat was about?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me, James. It's a pleasure. Yeah, to tell you the truth, I was very familiar with Mortal Kombat as a kid growing up, and seeing the movie for sure in '95. I was really impressed by the way. I mean, at that time, right? The quality standards were, I think, quite. It must have been quite amazing. It doesn't really hold up until today, but yeah, I was inspired by that also because we had an Asian character lead in the film.
Liu Kang. Yeah.
Robert Shaw, right? Yes, Liu Kang. So yeah, it was an inspiration, and also helped me to kind of help me for when I received the job, when I got the role, because shortly before we started filming, I rewatched the '95 movie again.
Okay.
And just for some nostalgic reasons probably, but also to see again if it, like, what kind of an impact it would have on me today. And I felt very positive about it. I think it's a fun movie. I still until today I can still enjoy it, so that's great. It became a classic. And in terms of, sorry.
Yeah, I suppose, Max, you're very well aware of the sort of franchise, and I suppose around that time there was sort of three sort of blockbuster sort of fighting sort of games, video games, and they all tried to make the transition into movies. One, obviously, we know was Mortal Kombat, produced by NetherRealms, and sort of back in the early 90s. Another one was produced by Capcom, was called Street Fighter. And then the third one that came along a bit later was produced by Natcom. It was called Tekken. And I suppose Street Fighter tried with Jean-Claude Van Damme and Raul Julie. They tried to break into that franchise in terms of movie sort of franchise. They one crack of it. It didn't really work out. Tekken tried it as well in terms of in 2012. They tried to break into that sort of the transition from video fighting game to the movie screen. That didn't really work out. But for Mortal Kombat, it's the one of those things that has done it very successfully. 2 movies, 2 TV series in Conquest and sort of Legacy. And why do you think that is so, where Mortal Kombat has succeeded, where Tekken and Street Fighter sort of failed to do so?
Wow, that's a very interesting question, because I think they all share some similarities. All of these games. I mean, they have Asian characters. It's about martial arts, and it's a world that is out of this world, for sure. I think with Mortal Kombat, probably, well, there's another factor that comes when we're talking about Mortal Kombat, is the gore. So maybe that's part of why it was successful and still is up until today. I also think the lore and all of that, like the way how the characters have evolved, and their story background has become so rich, and just the whole world. Actually, I think it started off with being very simple and having a plain story plot, but right now it just got very confusing for a lot of people, I'm sure, because the world has expanded and has grown. I don't know. I don't know what is the secret, like why Mortal Kombat is still so up to date and so successful. Maybe also because I think if we're talking about the 95 movie, I think it was the produced with a pretty good budget at that time. And the characters just seem to be kind of iconic, you know.
Yeah.
Like I think it must have, like, that's a huge part of it. Well, I don't know if they do something similar with Tekken again, maybe they'd be successful as well. I think it depends a lot on the director, the studio, the producers, but also the actors, how they perform. And I think Simon, with this iteration of the film, he did a very, very good job, because he tried to make something that is unreal believable in a way.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main ingredient to make it successful and have the audience engaged. Because if you would copy it only from how the game is, it can get quite quickly become, cheesy and all of that. So yeah, that's probably one of the reasons.
I suppose, Max, I asked this sort of question to Jessica in terms of, so I'm going to pose it to you as well. I suppose, first of all, when we heard there was a Mortal Kombat movie in the pipeline, in the works, and people heard about there was going to be a new sort of a lead sort of character, a UFC sort of fighter, they were sort of wondering, well, normally in Mortal Kombat, it's Liu Kang plays the primary sort of hero type role, or it's Johnny Cage that plays the primary sort of role. This was a character that was not known to the Mortal Kombat universe, no history in terms of video games, no history in terms of comic books. It was quite a bold sort of daring move, and obviously to go down the route of having no Johnny Cage, I think the first time really in terms of the Mortal Kombat franchise, I suppose the die-hard sort of Mortal Kombat fan base were a bit scared at first, wondering how could Mortal Kombat exist without Johnny Cage in it?
Well, fair enough. I think Johnny Cage is such a beloved character. I I think the reason why they made this decision not to have him in the first film was because he is a very strong character who would take up a lot of space, because I think he would need a movie of its own. So yeah, I think in this first film that we did, we already had a lot of characters. We already had a lot of story to tell, and so adding another one that has such a strong presence to it would have probably caused some troubles to balance it out. So, but you got the tease for Johnny Cage for a possible sequel, and once that will happen, I don't think fans will be disappointed. Then we have enough time to actually tell his story. So they have to have a bit more patience, and we will give them what they want.
And I suppose, Max, speaking about your own character, Kung Lao, I suppose he's much steeped in sort of Asian folklore. He's sort of legendary, sort of fictional character, from his monk sort of heritage to his sort of fighting skills, to his relationship with Liu Kang and their sort of history, to his great grandfather and the great sort of Kung Lao as well. So there's so much diversity to the character of Kung Lao, because he's steeped in ancestral traditions in terms of Mortal Kombat, in terms of it was what he was brought up to when he was a boy, it was instilled in him in terms of that one day that he will be representing his clan or his monks in this sort of ceremony or sort of such. So it's a sort of character with sort of great scope and a sort of great background to work on, and it must be a joy as a character when you have such a broad range of elements of a backstory behind such a character.
Well, it definitely is. I feel very very privileged to be given the opportunity to portray this iconic character, if you want so. And it is so fantastic in a way because I think partly of the hat and the whole costume, because without the hat there wouldn't be a Kung Lao. I think it's just like really what like his special trademark in a way, that he fights with the hat, but also it looks kind of cool when he wears it. So I originally, when I did my research on the character, also pulled a lot from the Western movies and the way cowboys back then would carry themselves, and kind of not give away too much and add that mysteriousness to the character, not to show too much, but to make the audience question, okay, who is this guy, So, and then in terms of the fighting style, obviously Kung Lao has a very unique way of moving. I think it's the whole combination of fighting skills, but also his quite cocky character that adds to him being so iconic. And then the relation between him and Liu Kang is a quite special one, because the way we try to portray it in this iteration is that Liu Kang is more of a very peaceful and calm kind of person, very monk-like.
Yeah.
Whereas Kung Lao is quite the opposite. He likes confrontation, and he doesn't shy away, and he carries this kind of pride within himself. So early on, we decided that we wanted to show this contrast, because if they both would be too similar, then it wouldn't be that exciting. Yeah.
And I suppose, Max, in terms of Mortal Kombat, I spoke to Jessica in terms of the stunts, and she said she very much wanted to get full on into the sort of stunts and partake as much as she could. In terms of yourself, when you got cast role, had you a bit of a sort of a martial arts type of background? Had you dabbled in sort of movies that pictate sort of fight scenes or such? Or was it really one of your first experience working with a stunts sort of director, or did you have a double, or were you very much like Jessica, you were very hands-on in terms of trying to do most of your stunts yourself?
I was very lucky because I've been for the last 10 years part of the Jackie Chan stunt team.
Okay.
And so I've been working as a stunt performer as well as a stunt coordinator.
So you did all your stunts, so definitely.
Yes, I did 100% of my own stunts. Actually, it was quite funny because they when production started, they asked me, do you want a stunt double or not? And I told them, no, I don't need one. So I ended up doing everything myself. Yeah. But and so I had 20 years of martial arts experience, learning various martial arts styles, but I was primarily focusing on Chinese kung fu and wushu, and I used to compete also in tournaments. So it was great because I found out that I actually have a very similar fighting background to the character Kung Lao.
Okay.
A lot of the styles and elements he's using, for example, the Wing Chun punches, or he's using a lot of Southern Chinese Kung Fu, which I actually learned, and so that really helped to have that background, because I could then focus more on the character himself rather than having to learn too much new stuff. And the approach became more of fine tuning what I had learned already, and um, and that was the process. Yeah.
I suppose, Max, you've seen so much special effects in terms of movies and TV series that you've been on, but in terms of Mortal Kombat, when they said cut and that's a wrap, and it showed you replay the back with the green screen effects in terms of your character, were you still sort of like a giggling sort of schoolboy saying, "Wow, that's cool," even though you're sort of portraying these sort of motions and sequences in the stunts and holding yourself, but you don't actually get to see, you probably have a picture or vision in your head what it might look like, but when you see it for the first time on that sort of video screen played back to you with all those enhancements, does it still sort of take you back, or say does it give those sort of wow factor, or you say, wow, that's real cool, or do you sort of get that sort of element or
Yeah.
giggling like a teenage boy?
Oh, definitely, man. It was amazing seeing it for the first time on a big screen, and the first time I saw it, it wasn't even finished yet. Like they had done some of the visual effects, but not all of it, and it already impressed me so much because, like you say, when you're on a set, there's sometimes just a blue screen behind you, and you have to imagine the rest. So it was quite awesome to see that all being brought to life. I think the CG in it is amazing. I think it's believable, and they did a great job with that. It takes so much work to do all of these because it's all about the details, right? If
Yeah.
you Yeah, to make it believable. Yeah.
I suppose, Max, the last time the two Mortal Kombat movies came out in 95 and 97, and even Mortal Kombat Conquest in 2010 and Legacy in 2012, there was no sort of platform like we have now in terms of Netflix or Amazon Prime. I remember Kim Tajorian released a wonderful short mini series on YouTube that time called Mortal Kombat Legacy, 6 or 7 episodes. But obviously, if there was a platform like Netflix or Amazon, it could have been Prime. It could have been taken up for maybe 2 or 3 or 4 seasons. Obviously, that's there now, and there's such a demand, obviously, for the Mortal Kombat fan base, that when the last time the movies came about, TV series popped up in terms of spin-offs and sort of stuff like that. Is that something you're sort of open to? Have you done the Mortal Kombat role? If someone said to you, we want to go in this sort of route and explore the history of Kung Lao and his grandfather and the sort of generations in a sort of a TV series, or do you feel just a right, I've done the sort of movie, anything else would be paying this homage to it, I might see if there's a sequel and go that sort of route? Or are you open to any sort of offers in terms of the Mortal Kombat universe in the future as well?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I think the fans really want to see something like that. I would love to see something like that. So it's a question of whether we get the chance to
Yeah.
do it. And if we do, then definitely I'd be up for it, because right now I have grown so much into the role that I would just love to keep on, exploring uh, Mortal Kombat through the eyes of Kung Lao. Definitely.
I suppose, Max, for the first day you sort of walked into the location shot in Australia, and in terms of filming those sort of first scenes, did you get just sort of sense in your butterflies in the pit of your stomach walking into the set after day one and say, listen, I might have walked into something here a bit special that they might be talking for in 10 or 12 years time, or it might be a start of a long-term sort of history with this sort of unique sort of franchise? Because one thing about Mortal Kombat, it's very much like James Bond sort of sequence. It never goes away. After 3 or 4 years, there's a new video game, there's a new comic book, there's a new sort of spin-off. It just goes on and on. There's no sort of end. Like, there will always be James Bond movies. That's never going to go away. It'll be just a different actor or a different sort of plot or sort of story. Did you feel walking into the first time in the studio, the butterflies in the sort of pit of your stomach, saying this could be a start of something that could last for a very, very long time, this association?
Definitely. I felt on one hand the pressure because yeah, Mortal Kombat is quite an iconic game. So to fill in those shoe steps, it's quite a demanding task. And yeah, I had kind of those butterfly feelings that you explained in the first time when I stepped on set and seeing all the actors dressed up in their costumes, and at that moment I kind of felt, oh wow, this world is coming alive, so it was amazing. I think my advantage with this one was that people haven't seen Kung Lao on the very big screen yet, so this is kind of the first time, and I can only imagine what it feels like for other actors who have to fill in and step into the roles that other actors have already portrayed in the past. So I think I had a bit less pressure than them, frankly speaking. At the same time, I had to make sure that this new character also stands out in its own right.
I suppose, Max, I just got three more questions. I had two, but in terms of what you mentioned there, sort of stoked another question for me. You mentioned about stepping into roles that previous characters have played. And I suppose the one thing about Mortal Kombat in terms of the Shang Tsung sort of character, he's played by a legendary Asian actor in the past, in the movie in 1995 and 1997. The name is forbidding me. So to step into that role in particular, because he was always the face of Shang Tsung. If you saw Shang Tsung in video games, it was based around that sort of actor. That must have been a daunting role for the person who had to portray Shang Tsung for the first time, when it wasn't Cary Yamada that wasn't playing it.
Yeah, for this time, Mr. Chin Han is taking the role of Shang Tsung. Yeah, I think that would, I mean, if I would have to portray that role, it would have added a lot of pressure onto me. So, to be honest with you, I think he did an amazing job. I think
that's great.
Well, yeah, that's pretty much all I can say. I wish he would have had more screen time overall. Hopefully, in the future, he will. So I think it was an absolute great performance from him.
And I suppose we're on to the penultimate sort of question, the second last one I have for you, Max. Let's pretend I asked this question to previous actors who played a role in the Mortal Kombat universe and in the movies in 95 and 97 and TV series. Let's pretend there was a Mortal Kombat encyclopedia, a dictionary of sort of such, and they put the character Kung Lao into that sort of encyclopedia. And they left two blank sentences under his description name, part like a synopsis. And they rang your talent agent, got in touch with you, and they said, Max Huang, you've played the role of Kung Lao in Mortal Kombat. We would like you to write those two sentences in that encyclopedia to describe what you think of a person Kung Lao is. What would you like those two sentences to read?
All right, let me think. I'd say Kung Lao is a cocky but funny Shaolin monk with an attitude who shines through using his razor sharp hat. Killing off a bunch of baddies.
And Max, I suppose we're going to turn it over to your character now for the last 30 seconds, and he might enlighten all our Irish audience and why our Irish listeners why they should tune in mass in the next month or so with the debut of Mortal Kombat, the movie, the 2021 version in Ireland. So we'll turn it over to one and only Kung Lao himself.
Sorry. Can you repeat it again?
So basically, we're going to, for the last 30 seconds, we're going to turn it over to your character, Kung Lao, and he might enlighten all our Irish audience and listeners why
Okay.
they should tune in to the release of Mortal Kombat here in Ireland in the next month or so.
All right, Ireland, Irish Mortal Kombat fans, it is time for Mortal Kombat. This is Kung Lao speaking to you, and please go and watch the movie, even if it's online. What you will get is a firework of martial arts, and I'm sure all of the fans will be happy with this film. And we are continuing to give you more and more experience of the world of Mortal Kombat in hopefully future films. So go check it out and talk to you soon.
On that note, Max Huang, an absolute pleasure talking to you today to talk about the upcoming Mortal Kombat movie here in Ireland. 1997 was its last release. Roughly 24 years actually since the last sort of movie as such. We have the 2021 version. We're delighted to see it. It's gone down to rave reviews all over the world. 13.8 million, I think, in the US alone in terms of its first week, in terms of viewership, in terms of that. No doubt it'll reach those figures all across Europe. Max, a pleasure giving you time there to talk to us today, and we look forward to seeing your role of Kung Lao in this latest edition of the Mortal Kombat movie. But for the moment, Max Huang, stay safe, take care, and good health to you and your loved ones.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. Have a good one.